Oh. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Finding America, Stories from America. Haven't really landed on the name for this little story time we do. But if this is the first time you're here, and if it's not the first time, I'm sorry because I say this every time. This is a series that we've been doing where it's like a podcast where I talk about people that I've met in my travels and through my life. I've always been one of those people that could sit down and talk to you about your life. And I'm interested. I love someone's story. In my opinion, it's far better than anything you're going to get in the movies and a TV show, and in a lot of cases, books. I mean, everyone's got some comedy in their life, everyone's got some drama, everyone's got some action. Hopefully, we all don't have a bunch of horror in our life, but we all know that happens. Some people just get rolled the bad hand, or sometimes people just get dealt the bad hand. Apparently, I'm mixing dice games and card games together. But, then your life just turns into a nightmare. Hopefully, not many of us have that, but we all know it's out there. That's too bad. Today, we're kind of talking about one of those. It's an interesting story. And I've known this story and I've known the person that I'm talking about since the mid 80s, I think. Yeah, no, actually, probably the early 80s is when I first encountered a man named Lee. But before we get to Lee, if you, if you would, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit the subscribe button. These videos have been getting a lot more subscribers than normal videos do, even though these videos have far less views. It's really strange. A lot of new people really like these videos. For those of you that's not your thing and you're just here for my lists, I understand. Don't watch this video. Go on with your day. We'll see you Monday with a new list video. That's how it works here. But anyway, let's talk about Lee. So again, I'll cover some stuff that I've talked about before here. And also with this story, I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that I heard from other people about this guy because he was very interesting to me when I was a 16, 17-year-old kid. But this is the story of Lee, a homeless man. Lee, first time I ever met Lee, I was working at a place called Chief Auto Parts. Chief Auto Parts was on Prospect and Torrance Boulevard in Redondo Beach, California. Look it up on the map. There's a housing area behind it that used to be our theater, our drive-in theater. It was great. Now it's a bunch of houses right behind that. There's car wash, and then there's the theater, or the movie drive-in theater. But I worked at the Chief Auto Parts, which I think might be no, that's years ago. I don't know what it is right now. But anyway, the little mini malls there on the corner still. But I worked there at an auto parts store, and I usually work the night shift. I've always worked night shifts, and back in the day, Chief Auto Parts was a place that was open till like midnight. Some of them were open 24 hours a day, but the one I was at was open till I think 9 or 10. That's irrelevant. But working that night shift, I'd see this homeless guy out there. Now, I don't think he was black. He had that, almost like a mix of Hispanic and black, and he was interesting, and he was interesting looking, and it was weird. Anyway, like Cuban. You see a lot of Cuban guys look like this. But Lee would sit there on this little wall we had for hours, not bothering a soul. He'd just read the paper, and then at some point he'd just get up and leave. And then after seeing him probably about 10 times, I decided I'd go out and talk to him and ask him how he's doing. My boss at the time, assistant manager, whatever, had told me I see him hassling anyone, chase him off. So I watched him for quite a few nights while I was working, just kind of look out there, see what he's doing. Never hassled anyone, never bothered anyone. So I went out one night and asked him how he was doing. I think I was sweeping the parking lot or something like that, and asked him how his night's going. And, I'm doing good, doing good. Did some things today. I remember that, just did some things today. I asked him if he'd eaten that day, and he said he did. And I asked him if he needed anything, and he said, "No, I'm good. I'm okay." Well, he's obviously homeless. And I thought that was a little strange at first, that this homeless man was just offered a little help and he said no, which kind of piqued my interest to him. I think that's what made me interested in this guy. So a couple weeks go by and we just, hey, how you doing? That type of thing. Because he'd always be there, it seemed like. And then one day I finally stopped and talked to him. I'm like, "What's your name? I see you out here all the time." And he's, "Oh, my name's Lee." He stood up and shook my hand. It wasn't anything like, it was like two normal people, which we are just two people. But normally there's a little bit of a difference between people that are homeless and people that aren't homeless. There's like this wall of communication breakdown. It's really strange. But he jumped up, shook my hand like we were meeting at a party someplace. And I talked to him. His name was Lee, and he'd been homeless for quite some time. And he had a very interesting story. He so had a very interesting story. He grew up not too far from this auto parts store I was working at. It grew up in a place called Wilmington, California. Not to be confused with Wilmington, Delaware, even though both are pretty dangerous places right about now. Actually, I got to rephrase that. I heard Wilmington's doing a lot better in Southern California. I could be wrong. Maybe that's Harbor City. Who knows? But they're right next to each other. But Lee grew up in Wilmington, and Lee was a baseball player in high school and actually got a scholarship to one of the major universities in Southern California. I don't want to say which one it was because I'm not really sure. And anyway, he was a really good baseball player to the point where he got a scholarship to a major university. And he went to the school and he got somewhat of an education there. Now, come to find out later on, it didn't end up all rosy and perfect for him when he got to the university. But so I would see him over the years, and occasionally I'd stop and talk to him. And this went on probably about 2 or 3 years. I always asked him if he wanted anything to eat, and he need anything. And he's all, no, no, but if you ever see me and you got some soup on you, I always like a good can of soup. That's all he ever asked for me, just a can of soup. Thought, this guy is living on the streets. I see him all the time. I see other people talking to him and never takes anything from anyone. So that was really, really strange at first. I didn't get it. One night I was working at the auto parts store and I saw a Redondo Beach police officer talking to Lee. It's probably around 1994, 93. No, I'm sorry, 84, 83. Get my decades mixed up. And the police officer was talking to him. And then after he was done, he came over and started talking to me. And I said, yeah, I see him out there all the time. He doesn't bother anyone. He said, oh, yeah, Lee never bothered me. Oh, you know him. He knew his name. He said, oh, yeah, I've known Lee for a while. Lee's a good guy. Okay. I've offered him, to get him something to drink, something to eat. And he won't take it. I was like, okay, so this is a thing. He doesn't, he's a homeless man and he doesn't take help from people. He goes, no, he has some money coming in and he does odd jobs for businesses and it keeps him fed and everything like that. So I was like, oh, okay. So got a homeless guy that's still making his own way. He's not there for a handout. This is just his life. For whatever reason, I didn't know at the time why Lee was on the streets. He was just there and he had it together as it can be for someone that's living on the streets as a homeless person. I mean, he slept in parks. He slept years later, I found out that he used to go in the corner of the car wash that was behind Chief Auto Parts. There's some bushes back there and he'd sleep there. So, I didn't know that most nights I was getting off and Lee was actually in the woods like 20 feet away from me. So that was kind of not woods, bushes. So the years go on and I would see Lee occasionally. I started carrying soup in my car and Chef Boyardee ravioli because one time he mentioned he liked that too. So I always had 2 cans in my car wherever I was. If I saw Lee, he got those cans. I'd think over my life, I probably gave him 15 cans of food. And each time knew my name. Young Mr. Briggs, he called me. That was the thing. People called me Young Mr. Briggs because my dad was around. It was Mr. Briggs. So I'd get all these older people calling me Young Mr. Briggs all the time. Strange. But yeah, so I would see Lee everywhere. Then one day, I hear Lee got into not in a little trouble. He helped someone that was in trouble. Apparently down in the Redondo Beach Pier, someone was like an ex-boyfriend decided he was going to start beating up his ex-girlfriend, while she was on a date or something like that. And I guess there was this whole fight. And Lee, out of nowhere, comes over and wrestles the boyfriend, the abuser, to the ground and held him there till the police got there. And one of the cops was telling me, he's all, yeah, Lee picked him up, threw him on the ground, and, held him there till we got there and went through the whole thing. And we got Lee, they got Lee a hotel room that night so he can go get a shower and stuff. I was all, that's nice. Probably doesn't get many showers. He makes his way down to the VA every once in a while and gets a shower there. I'm all, hold on. Lee's a veteran. That's when this cop told me a lot about Lee. Lee was going to one of these universities to play baseball. This was back in like the late 60s. And something happened with his family, and he had to quit school and had to give up his scholarship. I don't know what it was, but it was something traumatic enough to where Lee had to leave the university that he was going to for free. Now, he's from Wilmington. Chances are Lee doesn't have a lot of money back then. His family probably didn't. That's the only reason he was probably going to college is because he could play baseball and he got a scholarship. For whatever reason, Lee has to leave. Well, this triggered a problem. About a year later, Lee was drafted for Vietnam, and he ended up going to Vietnam. Now, my understanding is the cop told me that he spent some time there, not a lot of time like some of the other guys that come back, but he'd spent some time there, and they say he's never been the same. Never picked up another baseball, never did anything like that. He was just a broken man. Now, that cop tells me he was just a broken man. So I go in the army. I get out. One of the times I got out, I went back and forth a couple times, but I got out. I was working for a family friend who owned these two shops down in Hermosa Beach, California. And I see Lee there one day walking by. I'm, oh, Lee's still around. And the owner, who's standing right next to me, goes, "Yeah, that's a sad case right there." I'm all, "Yeah, I've heard stories about him before." He's all, and he tells me he's a broken man. Sometimes people just are broken. So I guess whatever happened to Lee with his family and then the Vietnam thing, he basically had a meltdown and, kind of had a breakdown and just never got his life back together. And he lived on the streets for years and years. So I went back in for another stretch in the army and sometime with the National Guard too. But during that time, I guess Lee had been hit by a car and it busted him up pretty good. And and a lot of people were there to help him, but he ended up at the VA hospital, bedridden or whatever, and only lasted about 2 years in there before Lee passed away. Now, come to find out that Lee had a bunch of money when he died. Who know? I mean, I should say a bunch of money. I it wasn't like millions, but I believe it was a couple $100,000, if memory serves me right. Lee dies with a couple $100,000 in a bank account someplace. He had been collecting money from the military. He had been working on the side for businesses like restaurants and stuff. Have you ever been in the back of a restaurant out back, out the back door? It's usually pretty gross. Lee had a little deal with some of the restaurants. He would go by there some nights and clean it up for them, and they would pay him. And Lee saved all his money, lived on the streets, and just did nothing. And it was the most amazing thing. I was totally interested in this guy for the longest time because I just couldn't believe that this guy, he broke all the stereotypes. He wasn't begging for money. He wasn't looking for a handout. He didn't want to get off the streets. So, he was just broken and there's nothing to fix him. And I think if he wouldn't have been hit by a car, he would have lasted, a little more time. But I don't think he ever would have got it together. I think he was just where he wanted to be. He'd go to the park. Now, this is the other thing about Lee. Didn't really look like a homeless guy. He always had decent clothes. He wasn't one of those guys wearing a bunch of jackets or anything like that. It's Southern California, so never got that cold to where he would, need a big thick coat or a tent or anything like that. Lee always looked like he was maybe going to a construction job. That's the best way to explain it. Always had his hair cut, just looked like a normal dude that happened to be sitting on a wall or on a park bench someplace or laying down at the park. That's why I'd see him a lot of times there. Go skating by this one park, which I'll tell you about that park again later because I know another guy used to hang out at that park. But Veterans Park down in Redondo Beach. But Lee's life was just the way he wanted it to be. He would read every day, newspaper, always had a book from the library. That was one of the nice things about him, maintaining himself a little bit. They didn't mind him coming in the library. They didn't treat him like another homeless person. And from what I understand, he was extremely nice to everyone that worked in the library right there. Go in, check out a book, come back the next day, get another book. So he was just living the life that he wanted to live. Whatever trauma he had suffered that put him on this path, He accepted it. He accepted his life as this, and he wasn't bothering anyone. So in a way, I kind of admire him because he just lived his life how he wanted to live. Anyway, so Lee passes away. I want to say it was around 97, about the same time my mom passes away. And anyway, so my mom passed away. Probably a few years after that, I run into the old manager from Chief Auto Parts. He's, oh, yeah, we're talking about working at Chief. He goes, you used to have that homeless guy that would come in and ask about you all the time. What? I'm all, what homeless guy? He's all, Lee. Lee would come in when you went to the army and would ask how you're doing and stuff like that. I was like, holy crap. I actually made an impact on a homeless man's life to where he actually remembered me and wanted to know what was going on with me. He goes, yeah, I just told him I didn't know much about what was going on with me or with you. And that was it. But he said he came in quite often, just asked, how am I doing? Have I heard from it? Stuff like that. They were really strange, really strange. I think it was just the fact that, people just pass him every single day. Just don't give him a second thought. And then, people like myself stop and actually talk to him and treat him like a human being, give him a little bit of his dignity back, I guess. Uh, he's not invisible. He's not ignored. Someone actually cared enough to talk to him for a few minutes. And I think that went a long way for someone like Lee. Because he didn't seem crazy, didn't act strange. He acted like anyone out there. If I just sat down and talked to you, if you were talking to him on the phone, you'd never know he was homeless. He was just a normal dude that decided he didn't want to be strapped down to an apartment or a house or anything like that. It's really strange. But I was really sad when I heard Lee passed away. That was, I hadn't thought about him in years when I heard the story of him dying. Yeah, it was too bad. But yeah, I think in a lot of ways, it was the first time I actually realized homeless people sat, and back then we just called them bums. Sorry, it's politically incorrect. I'm just talking about that's what we said back then. I think it was the first time I sat down. This is a normal human being. In my teenage head, it's like most people, you just think it's something else. That's something else out there. And then you sit down, talk to him, and go, yeah, that's a normal dude right there. He's just doing things different. So yeah, that was the story of Lee, and it's kind of a short story. I wish I had more details on it, but I just thought it was so interesting that he was just a homeless guy that didn't want no help. He's helping himself and being homeless. Gotta love that. So when we upload this video, I'm going to upload it and I think I'm going to stream it, but I won't be on there. It's not like a live stream. It's just these videos like this. I guess if you stream them to YouTube, YouTube picks up on them more. I mean, these videos normally don't get a lot of views and I'm trying different things. So if you're watching this and it says it's a live stream, I worked that out tonight. It's not really a live stream. But all right, that is today's video. Nice Sunday video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. I hope, you found Lee's story interesting. I'll be back with another one, maybe not next week, the following week. It's really interesting. It's about someone that you all know of, probably, but you probably don't know the backstory. All right, guys. Hopefully I'll see